Fairly recently, as of making this video, Minecraft players have been bestowed the gift of 1.11 Minecraft. But whenever you're watching this video, the topic should stay relevant for the rest of Minecraft history to come, however long that may be. For now, the version adds some new mobs, new structures, and a handful of other neat features expected for a typical Minecraft update. But when I went to browse the Reddit post regarding the matter, many people complained that they'd have to make new worlds to find any woodland mansions, the new structure. Otherwise, they'd have to explore far beyond into new chunk territory. This has been a problem throughout all of Minecraft history. Whenever a new version surfaces that changes the way the world generates or adds new structures, they of course will not be found within any chunks already loaded in the version before. Any new system of chunk generation cannot overwrite the past chapters, but rather simply changes how the chunks generate in the future from the not yet rendered chunks onward. As a consequence, many players' single player worlds are a bit of a mixture. A mixture of two or possibly many more systems of level generation throughout Minecraft's library of version history. For these cases, let's call them polyworlds. Now, polyworlds have some fairly unique quirks. Because of the sudden change in chunk generation, you may find one seed having many different appearances through time. Take the unassuming seed, #1 Nullatrum fan. I flew to the center 00 in both 1.11 official release and 1.8 beta from years ago to see the stark differences. Today's version of this seed puts us at a plain biome with a river cutting through. Beta shows a completely different scene, however. We see the old form of the swamplands extending for a little bit around us. But what happens when we open up the old 1.8 beta world on a Minecraft client today in 1.11? For a while it appears just like the old terrain, but once we travel past the chunks generated in the past, we find the true birthmark of this now poly world. At the 14th chunk mark, away from the origin, the drastic changes of sudden hills and biomes make its appearance concisely. This is a polyworld of 1 degree, 1 degree meaning one additional version of terrain generation applied to this one world. But thanks to Minecraft's constant updates, it's possible to go beyond 2, 3, or perhaps dozens of degrees. It's all up to how many significant updates there have been in terrain generation, how many versions you can convert to between the beginning of time to today, and how old a Minecraft world you can start from. So I'm not quite sure if it's possible to find an exact limit to how many degrees a polyworld can have. But this caused my thoughts to wander. If the overworld itself can suddenly change to adjust with the times, then how about generated structures? Can we see half villages, half dungeons, and the like? Let's test this hypothesis. I'll be using 1.8 beta as my old version just because of the convenience of creative mode, and today's 1.11 Minecraft for the future version to morph our simple world into a polyworld. The idea is simply to find a structure today that wasn't in 1.8 beta, or at least that specific world from it. Then create a new world back in the past with the same seed, load a portion of the chunks the structure would encapsulate, and load the rest in today's version of Minecraft to hopefully generate a partially built structure. Arguably the rarest form of structure achievable, if it is achievable. Like many things, this may prove to be simple in theory but difficult in practice. Let's get some basic stuff out of the way first. Just in case you don't know, chunks are a unit of volume in the Minecraft world, now 16 by 16 by 256 blocks. Additionally, the world generates in units of chunks, not by the individual block. Thus, to test this hypothesis, we have to continue thinking along the lines of these chunks. First, how can we know the amount of chunks generated around Steve? These days we have a convenient slider to actually choose specifically how many chunks the player can see in a square area around them. But this is not actually how many chunks are rendered at the given time. The game itself goes one layer of chunks further. For a 12 chunk render distance, the game actually has a 13th already loaded beyond what you can see. In 1.8 beta, the choices were instead broken down to 4 simple selections: tiny, short, normal, and far. Far visually loads 12 chunks, but the game itself renders 13 chunks. I was flying around with far render distance in 1.8 beta, so that's why previously we found our hashtag #1 Nullatrum fan, Polyworld, began to update its terrain generation at the 14th chunk, as the 14th chunk constitutes the start line of new terrain generation. Moving on with this experiment, I'll continue to use far render distance for continuity. One more factor we must keep in mind are spawn chunks. The chunks around the spawn point of a given seed are always loaded so long as the player is in the overworld. These spawn chunks are 16 by 16 chunks in area. Also note that the spawn point itself is not necessarily 0, 0. I believe for the last seed I displayed, I spawned somewhere around 19-256 for my X and Z coordinates before I flew out to 0, 0. So to avoid these complications, let's try to find a multi-chunk size structure in 1.11, while still being decently far away enough from the spawn chunks. From there, we'll determine via F3 information what chunks the structure generates in, and by simple math determine how far Steve will need to travel towards the structure point back in 1.8 beta. Let's see here, creative world, check, inconspicuous seed, check, and find a relevant structure. Well, let's actually check. Villages did make their appearance in 1.8 beta, but due to how many changes there have been, it's completely possible that this village wasn't even there in the version from years ago, just because of the new mechanics of terrain generation. And just as I anticipated, the old version warrants no signs of human or villager contact. Back to the Future, I went ahead and marked the start of the 51st and 52nd chunks in the Z direction with redstone blocks, so we know our target. We want to load 1.8 beta just before the start of the 52nd chunk, so when it comes to 1.11, we'll hopefully see a half village if my hypothesis holds true. Let's figure out how far then we need to travel back in beta. For simplicity's sake, I'll just pick 200 for our X coordinate, just to line up with this correct area. The real number cruncher for this example comes with the Z-axis. To load the 51st chunk in the Z direction, that means Steve needs to head to the 38th chunk in that same axis, 13 chunks back to account for far render distance back in 1.8 beta. In coordinate speak, that's anywhere from Z608 to Z623. So, back in beta, I headed to 200, 618 in XZ coordinates, being careful not to walk a single chunk out of line. I saved and quit, loaded 1.11, and went to see the results. I'm actually very pleased to say that I've uncovered perhaps the rarest form of structure that was beneath our noses the whole time. Partially generated structures, or half-generated structures, or bastard structures, whatever you want to call them. Polyworlds perhaps hold the key to unlocking a whole new perspective of once familiar structures. Now, I'm not saying nobody's ever uncovered one of these things before, but I'm fairly confident I'm the first person to put it into words and put it to experiment form. So if you have a Minecraft world that's had the torch pass between terrain generation a few times, maybe give a look at those distinct polyworld borders, and you might just find some of the rarest structures in Minecraft. Thanks so much for watching, and please subscribe to my channel for new great content every Saturday. Check out another video on screen, and have a great day. Also, big thanks to my first patron.